Hello, this is Elijah Elder-Rosen, and I'm here to tell you about the process of developing a math lesson. One of the best ways to do this is to use the principles of backwards design, as outlined by Wiggins and McTeague in their book Understanding by Design. So, using this process, it's going to be standards oriented. So, we're going to identify the standard that we want to teach. We're going to use the standard to create a specific measurable goal. We're going to use that goal to create our assessments. So we're going to create our assessments to measure the specific goal. And then we're going to create our activities that support our students in learning towards that goal. And with that in mind, we're going to integrate the points of chapters 4 and 5 of Visible Learning for Teachers by Hattie. So since we're teaching math, and I'm not a math teacher, I'm a biology teacher, I chose sort of arbitrarily this math standard. So this is standard A-CED.2, create equations in two or more variables to represent relationships between quantities, graph equations on coordinate axes with labels and scales. So this is an Algebra 1 standard, and we are going to use this standard to design our goal. That way the students are headed in the right direction. So identify our desired results. What do we want our students to grasp? How do these learning outcomes align with the standards? Well, in this case, we're creating two equations with two or more variables, and we're graphing those linear equations on coordinate axes. So our assessment should be performing that task, and our activities should be supporting that by having them practice that skill and understand those processes. In general, we want this to be student-centered learning to promote deeper understanding and enhance academic achievement. So set goals based on the standard. Well, this is where it's important to use Bloom's taxonomy to be able to use verbs that are for higher up on the taxonomy pyramid. That way we're promoting higher order thinking skills in our students. So in this case, students will be able to create equations in two variables to represent relationships between quantities. The second goal will be graphing equations on coordinate axes and scales. So these are our two goals. They specifically relate back to the standard, and we are going to base our whole lesson on this. So while we're talking about the standards and our goals, we're going to have to assess our students' progress relative to these goals. So it's important to consider what is acceptable evidence of student learning. What shows visible learning in our students? How will I assess my students' understanding and mastery of the learning goals? What evidence will demonstrate that the students have achieved the goals? So this is where it's important for me to select appropriate assessment methods. So in this hypothetical scenario, this will be the first time that I've taught these skills to the students. So at the end of this class, I'll be giving them a formative assessment in the form of an exit ticket. Later on, when we're done with our entire unit on linear equations, we'll have a summative assessment to look back and see how our class did in the past and generally see if people are ready. You know, it's a way to gauge the entire class's understanding from the past rather than a way to guide formatively our next steps in teaching. Where my formative assessment, if I'm, having the students create these equations and graph them, the evidence that I want are those equations. The evidence that I want are those graphs. And that way I can take a look at those and see, are there common errors? Are there things that I can address in the next class? Are there ways that I need to adjust my teaching based on the reflection of the assessment data that I've gotten? So planning learning experiences and instruction. It's crucial to design learning experiences that help students achieve the goals you've set for them. We're going to identify strategies that support student learning and engagement. We're going to develop formative assessments and check for understanding throughout the lesson to monitor progress. We're going to provide feedback and time to reflect upon that information. So one of my favorite ways to do this is the think, pair, share model of classroom discussion. So that really does support student learning and engagement. It's a way for me to check for understanding before moving on to the next topic, identify common errors. It's also a way for the students to get feedback from their peers and from me. And one of the things I like to do is give them a form with a space for reflection. So there'll be a small amount of time at the end of the think, pair, share activity where the students can reflect on the information, the feedback that we gave them on their learning. Okay, so differentiation strategies, very important, right? We're going to have lots of different types of learners in the classroom. We want everyone to succeed. So there are some things that we can do to specifically support the English language learners in the classroom. There are also some principles of universal design for learning that are useful for every student, including English language learners. So as far as just specific supports for EL students, visual aids and manipulatives are very useful. Having a symbol of these concepts and something other than a word floating out in space is very helpful. A lot of people are visual learners, and this works well for them. Differentiated group tasks based on English language proficiency levels. So this is one that I use a lot in my current class. I have a lot of English language learners. I often pair them with a student that's slightly stronger in English. And in fact, in one of my classes, I have 6 English language learners, and one of my students is on the end of the spectrum where they really have no English skills at all. Several of the other English language learners are very good at English, and they are able to translate into Spanish a lot of the more difficult concepts for my English language learner, and pairing those students together is just an extremely valuable tool because they're able to communicate in ways that I can't because I am not bilingual. I don't speak Spanish to that level. I have a little bit, but not enough to really communicate complicated mathematical and scientific concepts to a student that doesn't speak English. So another strategy that I like to use is sentence stems and language supports. I often create a vocabulary word wall where there are 2 sides, one in English and one in Spanish, put up there for them to see while we're going through all of our exercises. We add to it from time to time. I frequently ask the students if a word is worthy of going on the word wall. If it's too easy for them, we don't write it up there, but if it's something confusing or difficult to spell, we'll put it on our vocabulary wall. The sentence stems are also very helpful. Sometimes just having that framework for the students to think within can help them from going on a lot of different tangents and being confused. And then also variety of the complexity of problems in my formative assessment. So I like to have 3 gradations of difficulty, bronze, silver, and gold. The bronze is sort of a supported, stripped down version of the concept. The silver is exactly right down the middle, the way I would traditionally expect it to show up in a classroom. And the gold level is an opportunity for extension for students that are getting the concept, ones that want to take it a little further. Aside from the specific EL strategies that I use in my classroom, I try to incorporate as many different aspects of universal design for learning. I really like the idea of having differentiation strategies that would literally work for anyone. So that way, if you don't have a firm grasp on what your class is going to look like ahead of time, you can have systems that would work for anyone who might come in. So this looks like varying the process of content, process, and product. Varying the process of content is giving them multiple means of representation, having the students hear about it, read about it, watch videos about it, draw about it, engaging as many different senses as we can to get the point across. The variation in process can be something like giving the students a choice in where they want to work, how they want to work. One of the ways that I differentiate my classroom is by time. Some of the students are chronically absent. Some of the students need more time to review, so I maintain a website where all of my notes and materials are available. So if they need to go back and look at them later, they can. As far as product, the variation there, we could allow the students to verbally tell us about the concept, to draw about it, to write about it, to give them as many choices of the way that they want to prove their knowledge that we can. Implementing the lesson. So here's where we get to put all of our good planning into action. If all goes well, we're moving closer towards the standards, and we're gonna, teach these different activities that are going to move us towards our goal that's going to support the standard. Assessments is an extremely important part. In my class that I'm planning right now, I plan on giving them a formative assessment in the form of an exit ticket. Again, the main point is to gauge student understanding, to give them feedback, and to identify common errors, adjust instruction, things of that nature. The summative assessment I will not be giving at the end of this lesson. I will be giving after several more subsequent lessons so that they are being tested on the whole concept of linear equations and graphing. Final tips and takeaways. We're using principles of backwards design. We're going to look at the standard and identify the standard we're going to teach. We're going to turn that into measurable goals. We're going to design our assessments to assess the students relative to those goals, and we're going to assign instructional activities that prepare the students for the assessments. Aside from that, we're using concepts from chapter 4 and 5 of Hattie's book, Visible Learning for Teachers. This includes effective feedback, visual teaching practices, clarity in communication and student engagement, and just in general is going to make this a high quality class. Thanks for watching my video about designing a math lesson.